Welcome to Connected. We are speaking with historian and author William Dalrymple about his latest book, The Golden Road: How Ancient India Transformed the World. It explores how India spread its influence and cultural legacy through religion and a maritime trade network. So let's now shift to how traces of the past shape the geopolitics of the present. Can India launch a Golden Road 2.0 the way China has revived the idea of the Silk Road as part of its Belt and Road strategy?
Well, one can only admire the way that the Chinese have, in a sense, weaponized this idea, which is now so common as to become a historical fact. If you look at the reality, I think the basis, certainly in the early period, is very sketchy. India has long dreamt of having some sort of rival sphere of influence, and the slightly clumsily named Middle East Economic Corridor, the MECC, is an idea which has been around for a while, and which India is seeking to revive as a counterweight to the Belt and Road. And in recent days, there have been some attempts to rename this as the New Golden Road. So I would be very pleased if my book ends up giving it a slightly more catchy title than the MECC, which doesn't roll off the tongue with any great celerity.
So, given what India once was, or ancient India once was, how do you think it could shed light today on the struggles
Well,
we're seeing for the
I
sphere
think
of influences we're seeing? I mean, including the U.S. too
yeah,
and China.
there's no question that India, still has the growth which China had in the early 2000s. That's happening now in India. India is currently growing at 5 to 8%, depending on which year you're talking about. And I think most economists agree that by the end of the century, whatever happens, the three great economic powers in the world are going to be America, China, and India. What no one knows is which of those three are going to be on top, and which are going to be the bottom of the three. But I think there's very good reason to say that India has been underrated up to now. India has often been regarded as a poor country, while throughout most of history, like China, it's been the main center of economic activity in the globe. Between India and China, throughout most of history, between 70 and 80% of world GDP was produced. It's only the colonial period that this sort of quirk happened, when European gunboats rode in, conquered India, fed opium to China, and did a whole variety of humiliating things which held India and China way back. But since the end of the colonial period, since the 1950s, we've seen first China, now India, rise back as major economic powers, as major political and cultural powers that are now rising. Many, I think that the chaos of America under Trump is likely to accelerate that. I think this is an interesting moment to start thinking of the century ahead, where one can easily imagine China and India being far more powerful and central to world affairs than they were in the last century.
Bring it back to how your book is being received in India. Are you concerned that your work could become somewhat of a political tool, especially India is a very divided country, and you've said that you've been trying to give a neutral picture.
So I'm obviously not in India, though I've lived here for 40 years, and I'm not a card-carrying member of the governing party by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that India's role in history has been underrated. I mean, every child growing up, for example, learns about Archimedes in his bath, shouting "Eureka!" But virtually no one outside your parents and the rest of the Indian diaspora had ever heard of Aryabhatta or Brahmagupta. Mathematicians who in many ways were more influential than Archimedes, in the sense that the numbers that we all use are an Indian invention. It's arguably the nearest thing the human race has to a universal language. So I'm very clear that India's role in world history has been underplayed, and it's time that we began saying that. You don't have to be, a card-carrying Indian nationalist waving the Indian tricolour and sort of singing patriotic songs to accept that's the historical truth. And I think one of the reasons that this book has been welcomed in India, it's been at number one on the bestseller list now for over 6 months, is that I'm not a nationalist sort of bigging up India out of patriotic fervor, but a historian looking rationally at the data and saying that something has gone wrong in our understanding of history, and we need to rebalance things so that the enormous contribution of India and the maritime sea routes is better recognized.
I mean, what your book will do here in this part of the world is open up a lot of discussions on now the Golden Road versus China's Silk Road. But what we've seen from the kind of response we've seen from China in the state media is pushing back against your research, saying that, even labeling it as disinformation, suggesting, your suggestions that India's Golden Road will overshadow China's Silk Road, or has
Well,
overshadowed
my
China's
my
Silk
my
Road.
response to that would be they would, wouldn't they? I'm not coming to this for reason. It's not it's not a sort of cricket match or a game of baseball where I'm supporting one team. It seems to be self-evident that there's an important story here that hasn't been told, and it's not, in a sense, displacing the Silk Road completely, because the theory in my book is that the Silk Road is a later thing, that it happened really in the 13th century with Genghis Khan. And that point, you do have a reality where Marco Polo can leave Venice and reach Kublai Khan's capital in Shangtu a few months later with a single passport belonging to the Mongol Khans. But that was definitely not the case in Roman times. In Roman times, there was no evidence at all that Rome really had a clear conception, even of China, never mind direct contact, and vice versa. And so I think this is a history book rooted in hard research and data. And I would advise readers, both Indian and Chinese, to judge it on that basis rather than just on the basis of chest-thumping nationalism.
So why is it important? Why do we need to know about the Golden Road?
I think that the influence of the Golden Road is there all over Asia. When you look around Asia, you can see Indian influence wherever you look. You've only got to go through Southeast Asia and you see, as far as Japan, images of the Hindu gods still there. Stories like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana became national epics in Southeast Asia. The whole Buddhist world came out of Indic thought, and to a certain extent, that influence has been underplayed, underwritten, minimized. And at this moment, as India rises as importance, I think it's very important for people to realize that this isn't, a freak of circumstance, that a poor country has suddenly gained centrality in the world. In reality, India is a very rich country that's been rich for most of its history, that was impoverished by colonialism, and is now getting its equilibrium and its place in the world back again. And that isn't something strange or threatening or surprising. It's India regaining its natural place in the world, just as China has already done. The distance that China has moved from the century of humiliation, when Western gunboats and Western corporations selling opium could just sail up Chinese rivers and force the Chinese to buy their products, that is long ago. And China is now, one of the great economies of the world again. India is likely to do that in the next 40 or 50 years. We've seen a lot of investment in the last few years move from China to India. India is developing very fast. Its growth rates are approaching the growth rates that China achieved in the early 2000s. And this is providing, in a sense, the historical background to understanding that present.
It's in your footnotes. It's your book is rooted in a lot of research, which has led all the different moving parts have led to the Golden Road. But the fact that now all this information, this narrative is aimed at a popular readership, put in such a digestible form and so comprehensive, what are you hoping that those who read your book will get out of this? What are you hoping would be the impact of your book?
Well, I think there's been a great deal of scholarship on all the subjects I'm writing about for many years, but for whatever reason, you haven't seen the visibility. There's something that happens to historians as well as politicians called groupthink. That for 40 years we've obsessed about this idea which didn't exist before then, the Silk Road, and we've seen the past through that construction. It's time, in a sense, to shake things up a little, I think, and to realize that it wasn't just a story of overland trade to China, but there was a whole world of economics, of culture, of philosophy, of music, of dance, of art, and of religious currents such as Hinduism and Buddhism, which we haven't taken into account, and that this spread not just over Asia, but right across the West, giving us the numbers we all use, including 0.
What do you think? Does history still shape geopolitics? And what does that mean for countries like India and China? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you missed the first part of our conversation on ancient trade, cultural legacy, and the Golden Road that came before the Silk Road with William Dalrymple, click the video next to me to catch up. And for more interesting conversations from Taiwan and Asia, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell.